What happens when the stars Hollywood presented as larger-than-life icons quietly rejected one of the biggest beliefs in American culture? Behind the glamour, the awards, and the carefully controlled studio images, some of the most famous names in Hollywood questioned God, organized religion, or the idea of an afterlife altogether. Some were openly atheist. Others called themselves agnostic, while a few simply refused to accept religious answers without evidence. And in an era when celebrities were expected to look respectable, traditional, and morally upright, admitting those doubts could be surprisingly controversial. Today, we're uncovering 15 legendary Hollywood stars whose private beliefs were very different from what audiences expected. Some stories are straightforward. Others are far more complicated than the label atheist suggests. And number 1 may surprise you. Number 1, Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn was never the kind of woman who allowed Hollywood to tell her how to live, and her attitude toward religion was no different. The 4-time Academy Award winner was widely associated with atheism and was known for questioning conventional ideas about God, heaven, and an afterlife. Rather than accepting religious beliefs simply because they were inherited or socially expected, Hepburn preferred to rely on reason and personal responsibility. That attitude fit the independent personality audiences saw throughout her career. She rejected Hollywood's obsession with appearances, refused to behave like a conventional movie star, and built her life around her own rules. Her skepticism was another extension of that independence. What made it particularly striking was the period in which she lived. Hollywood stars were often expected to project wholesome, respectable images, and religion was frequently part of that image. Hepburn had little interest in pretending to believe something simply to make other people comfortable. For her, the important question wasn't what society expected her to believe. It was whether she genuinely believed it herself. Number 2, Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was famously suspicious of institutions, and organized religion was no exception. But calling him simply an atheist doesn't tell the whole story. Brando questioned traditional religious ideas while remaining fascinated by spirituality, nature, indigenous traditions, and the mysteries of existence. He disliked rigid systems that claimed to possess all the answers and believed human behavior was far too complicated to be divided into simple categories of good and evil. That skepticism matched the rebellious personality that made him one of Hollywood's most influential actors. Brando wasn't interested in accepting an idea merely because millions of people had accepted it before him. At the same time, he wasn't necessarily arguing that the universe had no spiritual dimension whatsoever. His position was much more complicated: reject dogma, question authority, but remain open to mystery. That distinction is important because Hollywood biographies often reduce complicated personal beliefs into a single convenient label. Brando's real attitude was far more intriguing. He didn't want someone else telling him what the universe meant. He wanted to question it for himself. Number 3, Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin made millions of people laugh, but behind the comedy was a man who spent much of his life questioning religious certainty. Chaplin was commonly described as agnostic, meaning he did not claim to know whether God existed. That uncertainty was significant because he lived during a period when public faith was often treated as an expected part of respectable life. Chaplin refused to pretend that he possessed answers he didn't have. His films also frequently focused on ordinary human beings struggling against poverty, injustice, and uncaring institutions. His characters were rarely saved by divine intervention. Instead, compassion came from other human beings. People helped each other, laughed together, and survived through courage and kindness. Chaplin's worldview was therefore less about proving that God didn't exist and more about refusing to accept certainty without evidence. His skepticism also reflected his complicated relationship with authority. Governments, institutions, and powerful individuals were often targets of his satire. Religion could become another institution worthy of questioning when it claimed absolute moral authority. Number 4, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson's relationship with religion was never as simple as a one-word label. During the early 1990s, he publicly discussed no longer believing in God, but he also acknowledged the emotional difficulty that came with abandoning traditional religious ideas. That honesty made his position particularly interesting. Nicholson understood that belief can provide comfort, especially when people think about death and what might happen afterward. But comfort, in his view, wasn't the same thing as proof. He questioned the idea of an afterlife while still leaving room for a sense of mystery. That contradiction is what makes his story so fascinating. Nicholson didn't present disbelief as some kind of effortless victory over religion. He recognized what could be lost when someone stops believing. The reassuring possibility of seeing loved ones again disappears. The promise of an existence beyond death becomes uncertain. Number 5, Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich became one of the most glamorous women in Hollywood, but beneath the legendary image was a fiercely independent thinker who distrusted conventional authority. Her attitude toward religion was closely connected to a broader belief in individual conscience. Dietrich's life demonstrated that she did not need religious authority to tell her what was right or wrong. One of the clearest examples came during the rise of Nazi Germany. Dietrich rejected the Nazi regime, became an American citizen, and performed for Allied troops during World War II. These decisions carried enormous personal significance because she had been born in Germany. She could have protected her career by remaining politically quiet, but she chose a different path. Her morality appeared to come from personal conviction rather than obedience to an institution. That was the essence of her skepticism. Religious language could talk about goodness all day, but Dietrich believed actions were what mattered. Number 6, Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster had the kind of screen presence that seemed almost impossible to control, and his attitude toward religion was equally independent. He was widely identified with atheism and was especially critical of religious manipulation. That skepticism became particularly interesting when he played the title character in Elmer Gantry, a charismatic traveling preacher who uses religious excitement and emotional manipulation to build influence. Lancaster's performance exposed the difference between genuine faith and the exploitation of faith for personal power. The character isn't frightening because he is obviously evil. He's frightening because he's charming. He understands exactly what people want to hear, and he knows how to turn fear and hope into influence. Lancaster's own skepticism made the role even more revealing. He wasn't simply attacking private religious belief. The deeper target was the ability of charismatic figures to use religion as a tool of control. And that idea remains relevant far beyond the era in which the film was made. Number 7, Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda spent much of his career playing men audiences instinctively trusted. He was the face of honesty, justice, and quiet moral courage. But Fonda himself was not a conventional religious believer. He was often described as an agnostic, someone unwilling to claim certainty about God. That distinction mattered. Fonda didn't necessarily need to attack religion to reject it. He simply admitted that he didn't know the answers. His famous performance in 12 Angry Men offers an interesting parallel. His character doesn't walk into the jury room claiming to possess absolute truth. Instead, he asks everyone to slow down, examine the evidence, and question their assumptions. That mindset closely resembles Fonda's own approach to belief. Don't accept certainty simply because everyone else is confident. Don't confuse popularity with truth. And don't pretend to know something you cannot prove. His skepticism was quiet compared with some of the louder critics of religion, but perhaps that made it more powerful. Number 8, Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster grew up in the spotlight and became one of Hollywood's most respected actresses, but she never felt the need to manufacture a religious identity for public approval. Foster has openly identified as an atheist, yet her attitude toward religion has been more thoughtful than confrontational. She has spoken about exposing her children to different religious traditions and allowing them to understand the beliefs that have shaped cultures around the world. That distinction is important. Foster's lack of belief didn't mean she believed religion was irrelevant. She understood that religion has influenced history, art, politics, literature, and family traditions for thousands of years. Her approach was essentially intellectual, learn what people believe, understand why they believe it, and then decide what you personally accept. In an industry where celebrities sometimes use vague spiritual language to avoid controversy, Foster's directness stands out. She didn't need to pretend to believe in God simply because millions of viewers might expect it. These 15 stars didn't all believe the same thing. Some identified as atheists. Others were agnostic, skeptical, or simply unwilling to accept organized religion as the final authority on human existence. Their stories also reveal something Hollywood rarely advertised: the person behind the famous face could have a worldview completely different from the image sold to the public. In an industry built on appearances, even belief could become part of the performance. But these stars chose, in different ways, to question the script. Which celebrity surprised you the most? And do you think Hollywood stars today are more comfortable talking openly about religion than stars were decades ago? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more hidden stories from the world of classic Hollywood.